Hi there, my name is Eva. I'm the director of the Scottish Yarn Festival, the Scottish Wool Producer Showcase, and I also have my own Scottish Provenance yarn brand. And today I'm just doing a relatively short piece to camera because I'd like to talk about British wool certification and quite specifically the newly launched regional Scottish label and a bit more of what that is, what it means, and why I believe it's important. So I'm going to preface this with saying that I was recently invited to the Selkirk Depot by British Wool to celebrate the launch of that label due to the work that I've been doing within elevating the Scottish wool industry and primarily because of my own Scottish yarn brand. And earlier this week, I was a guest of the King's Foundation, who invited me to the Great British Wool Revival Summit at Dumfries House, which was just an incredible honour. And obviously, I'm having conversations at these places, and it has a trickle-down effect and benefit to those who work with me as well, in terms of the festival. And I'm also seeing discourse online, primarily Instagram, about this as well. And I will be honest that there has been a little bit of backlash against me personally through some direct messages and a couple of emails, but not a huge amount about it either. And do you know, I've been in this industry for 10 years and I'm a lot more thick-skinned than that at this point. But it's made me think that there's maybe just a lack of cohesivity and explaining why this label is a big deal, why it is important, and really kind of a lot of the thought behind that. And I am not the person really to be coming out here and explaining this all to you. It's not my role, it's not my remit, it's not what I'm paid to do. But what I have noticed is that there just seems to be a bit of a disconnection. And if I can maybe help clear up some misconceptions, then that's what I would like to do. So, British Wool they're basically a broker, right? And they have a lot of wool that goes through their depots each year. So we're talking something like 6 million tonnes. It's millions of tonnes every single year go through their depots. And the whole point is that they're trying to get the best price for the farmers, for those producers of wool that they can at the end of the day. And we are at a high for the first time in a decade, which is fantastic news that we should all be celebrating. But realistically, that is still really just covering the price of shearing. So people coming together from whatever backgrounds or such that they have, whatever their vested interest in, to try and drive up the price of British or regional wool is a fantastic thing. And it's great that we're finally here, and there are a lot of different people putting a lot of work into making that happen, and who would like that to be even higher. Now, I'm not here in a British wool capacity. I am not here in a farming capacity. I am just here as what my role is in this industry and in this area that I seem to have carved out for myself. But I think it's a positive thing. And I think it could be better. Things could always be better. But what I'm thinking is there's maybe a bit of a misunderstanding is that not all that wool goes into creating wool for yarn for textile crafting. The majority of British wool goes into carpets for luxury industries. We're talking cruise ships and we're talking massive hotels. That's where the majority of British wool goes. And some of it will go into bedding, and some of it will go into manufacture, specifically yarn to be woven into cloth. And some of it will go to people like me for their yarn brands. And some of it agriculture, you know, there's various uses as to where this goes. And then the lanolin, which is a byproduct when it's going through the processes of, you know, once it's being bought and things as well. Well, that's on kind of a slight tangent, but you know, we've got byproducts of things like that as well. But that's the thing, the majority of this wool, I think the overall writing thing here is it's manufacture, right? And why the label is so important, it's wool producers, farmers, wool producers like me, people who own small yarn brands that have provenance, can apply to British wool for the certification. Some already have, I know a couple of people who have, and can now get the Scottish label, which anyone can do. It's a reassurance through the supply chain of where that wool has come from, and it has to go through the depot, is my understanding for that, although I could be wrong. But I would qualify if I want to continue, because I've started doing all the process, filling out. There's a lot of forms to fill out to do this. But I know my wool comes from Scottish depots, from Scottish farms. The mill take care of that at auction on my behalf, and I can follow my supply chain back, and that would qualify me for this certification if I want to pay the annual charge to become a licensee, and I have to be approved to be a licensee. And I think that's a positive thing personally for me, for my brand, for what I do, for where my market is, to where I generally export a lot of this. And it gives a reassurance of that provenance of the product. But a big thing about the wool brand I have created is the provenance. But my understanding is this is mostly to do with reassurance at a manufacturing level, and there is a degree of manufacture because of the way that my yarn is produced. It is being produced in the spinning mills, which are factories who are dealing with a lot of wool. But like I said, the majority of wool is going into carpets. Hands down, the majority of it's going into carpets, and then there's some into bedding, and there's some into manufacture going, you know, it's being turned into yarn, it's being woven into cloth. And why is this important? It's important because it gives a reassurance to consumers should they want that reassurance, and it's going to help industry when we are moving towards these digital passports, which you can go and Google and find out more about. But you know, these digital passports when it comes to export, which is where the majority of these products end up. So I've got an example here that I want to use to illustrate this, and I am not going to tell you who the manufacturer of this is because I don't want there to potentially be a pile-on, but we've already seen kind of an example of this on social media over the last couple of weeks, where there was a manufacturer based in Scotland focused on making socks, and they thought they would put out a transparency post, and it backfired spectacularly on them. I think that is fair to say, because their name included the name of a very well-known Scottish sheep breed, and they were selling socks made in Scotland. And I think there was a big assumption that the wool for the socks would also be Scottish, and it's not British. They are importing primarily Australian and New Zealand merino. Weren't able to straight up say whether that was non-mulesing or not, but in their marketing they kind of came across in their transparency, which they thought was a good thing. They were almost boasting about why they didn't use British wool. And really the takeaway from that is that the machinery that they have in their factories, it is not set up to handle the types of wool that we have. And it's not a case of you can't use British wool to make socks, because you can, and there are brands out there doing it fantastically well, but their machines are not set up to do that. Okay. This is something I found out recently, and this was an assumption on my part, because as I've become more involved in this industry, I have learnt and understood more. But your general member of the public is not going to understand that merino sheep do not live in Scotland. And there's assumption that if you're buying a product, what's the best way to say this? Essentially, the place of manufacture is not the same as the place of origin, and there seems to be an assumption that they are the same thing, and they are not. So I'm going to lift this up and I'm just going to very carefully make sure that I obscure the label. I have had this stole, this beautiful lamb's wool stole, for over a decade now. It's an investment piece. I was going to buy it, but a former partner bought it for me. We were going to a wedding. It was the wedding of his best friend. I wasn't sure what to wear. I don't have a huge amount of formal wear. I don't have the opportunity to wear it. But I had found a beautiful black vintage dress. It was a summer wedding in a country house. It was going on into the wee small hours. I wanted something to cover my shoulders, and I wanted a lamb's wool tartan stole. I knew that this was going to be an investment piece. That's fine, because when I buy something like this and it's got the quality and the price tag attached to it, it will last forever. These pieces do, if you take good care of them. We bought this, and my assumption was, until recently, that this was Scottish wool. This is a lamb's wool stole from one of the biggest, largest, longest running tartan manufacturers in Scotland, and it is 100% lamb's wool, but it is not Scottish wool. The label says made in Scotland because it is made in Scotland, but the assumption was and is that it was also Scottish wool. It's not. The reality is that this is most likely Italian lamb's wool, although I will never know. I'm never going to know. Same is true that you could go and buy a kilt, and again, this is an investment piece. This is an heirloom piece that will be passed down through families, and you are having the cloth woven in Scotland. You might even be paying a kilt maker in Scotland to make that kilt for you, and you assume that that's Scottish wool in the fabric of the kilt. And if that's important to you, then you need to ask those questions, because there is no guarantee that that is Scottish wool in your kilt. In fact, I'm finding out it isn't always. Sometimes it is, but it is not always the case. So this new certification label is a way of proving what these are, and these are huge manufacturers in some cases. So it is a positive. It is a positive for this industry. It's, it's provenance, if it's important to you. I mean, I feel cheated. I feel disappointed and cheated learning about this now, and my relationship towards this item has changed a bit. Learning what I know now, and because of what I do and what's important to me. Now, not all these things are important to all people, and that's absolutely fine. At the end of the day, I would rather that you're wearing natural materials wherever they are from. Ideally, when it comes to wool, I would like you to be buying Scottish or British, that's my personal choice of what I personally prefer to work with. But I also run a festival that has a lot of hand dyers, and the majority of them are not using British bases. They're using bases from wool from South America, and that is great. There is a market for that, and they are adding value to that wool from wherever they live in the UK and dyeing on it. Okay, that's great as well, because these are primarily also natural materials. All yarn, all wool is either farm or ranch yarn, unless you've got pet sheep. at the end of the day, it's a byproduct. It's natural. We should be using these things. We should be using less plastic if we can. But I don't know. I just feel that it's almost, some people I think are maybe feeling and framing this as like an exclusionary thing, that this regional label has been brought in, and it's not. And we can use it as producers if we want to. But I think sometimes, there's, when you have open conversations and you're giving that information and you're allowing people to make an informed decision about their purchasing choices, it's when we've almost got the equivalent of a greenwashing of a product, and the assumption is that because something's manufactured in a place, that's also the origin of all the materials, and it's not. And I think these are the conversations that we're needing to be having. And if that's something that's important to you, did you know that there's this label? Have you asked about the label? And they might not have that label because not everyone needs to opt in. But the about 100 odd quid it is for a year is nothing to these huge manufacturers. And if it gives people that reassurance in the same way that certain certification does to Scottish whisky and Scottish salmon, to other large industries and exports, then it's a positive thing. And if small producers also want to opt into this, and they are often leaders in innovation and what they do, then we can do this, but it's not intended to exclude anyone. And if you are a small producer and you would like to find out more about the certification, I would strongly suggest that you get in touch with the marketing department at British Wool, because they are the people that are best placed to help you learn more and for you to decide whether that's the right thing for yourself. And while I'm here, I think I'd like to kind of finish off just something that I kind of missed here and kind of talking to camera. Not everyone wants to buy direct through British Wool from the farmer, and that's fine. I completely understand that. But there is a reassurance for those who are manufacturing to buy through British Wool, because the fleece will be graded, and then you know that you're going to have the right grade of material from your machines, which can be an incredibly costly mistake if you do not know what you're talking about. And there are instances I have heard recently of people deciding that they're going to do small run clothing ranges, maybe just hats and scarves for whatever shop that they've got in a particular area, and they have found a local farm, and they do not understand that not all fleece is suitable to be turned into yarn to make garments. And they're not set up, it's not necessarily going to be right for the equipment to be manufactured where they are. And then they get to a point where they find that they can't continue, and it's a very costly mistake. So going through British Wool to do the purchasing in those instances is a really sensible thing. But again, also there are producers out there, small patch, doing things differently, who are maybe going direct to farmers and buying their fleece, but they're generally the ones that are doing literally hand processing everything, and it is much smaller and more laborious. And that doesn't take away from that. These products are all just different. There are none that are greater or none that are less than. They are all just different, and there's room for them all. But there's benefits to using certain organizations and things that are already out there, depending on what your end goal is and what you're purchasing for. And I think, yeah, these are just some of my thoughts and some of the things that I have learned about this. And if that helps you to learn a little bit more about what's going on in the industry, then I'm glad. I hope you find that it's been helpful, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.